The sounds of crickets were chirping at dusk in the woods, and the sounds of grass crunching was caused by an entity who was taken a step further, entering another adventurous yet risky challenge. Zarkhator scanned the entire area of the woods. He thought it was a peaceful night here, and could wonder a little. That place peacefulness, however, wouldn't last long, as he journeys around, walking past tree to tree. The crickets would continue to chirp loudly, and then would go quiet, only to start chirping again. As Zarkhator passed a few trees, he stumbled across something white in the distance. Curious, he approached. Whatever this white object could be was taped onto a tree. As he got closer, he saw that it looked like to be a page taped on the tree. He raised an eyebrow and got a closer glimpse of the page. It had a rather strange writing on it that read, "Don't look, or it takes you." Zarkhator grabbed the page from the tree and was rather confused on what this page meant when it read the following: "Do not mention" on the bottom right of the page, and it looked to what appeared to be a figure drawn on it. Suddenly Zarkhator heard what sounded like a thumping noise that echoed throughout the woods. The crickets remained silent, and all could be heard was the sound of thumping. Zarkhator pressed onwards and did what he could to ignore this sound, but his presence got the best of him. He wasn't alone. Something else was there and had really scanned his surroundings and take precautions. Zarkhator suddenly found what looked to be a bathroom-like house. Curious, he entered it. The walls looked rather clean, with the exception of the floors being stained what looked like to be grass. Not really relevant enough, though. He then found another page that was taped onto the walls. He entered a end part of the bathroom of like house. It read, "Always watches, no eyes." He took the page off the wall so he could see what looked to be a drawing of the figure's face, showing two X's on its face. Then it came to the conclusion that this figure had no eyes. Zarkhator got out of the bathroom, like house, and held onto the pages with his bottom forearms, scanning the area a bit more. Something made him clutch his head a little as he growled a bit. Static? His head throbbed slightly. The intense feeling of static would suddenly then stop. Zarkhator shook the feeling off of this, unsure if the sensation was, but he could tell this wasn't pretty or nor welcoming. He continued forward and would find some more pages. This one was some large rock that read, "Leave me alone." He took it, as this would just raise more questions for him. Was someone killed here? Was the victim begging whatever it was stalking them the thing to just leave him alone? It really had been the case, knowing that someone who wrote this before being abducted by this entity. The other page Zarkhator found was nothing more but drawings of trees, and the same figure was shown in the previous pages he found. It looked as if these had some sort of clues. It had to be. These pages were clues. Well, the more he finds, the more he'll get answers. Then he came across a brick wall. As he guessed it, the page was there. He walked up to it off the wall, and take what followed it was the page that read, "Help me." Then this would explain a lot. Whoever the victim was calling for help, as if they were being chased and stalked by this entity when they entered the woods. It, however, doesn't end here there, as Zarkhator suddenly looked to his far left. What stood there was a tall, faceless figure that stared at Zarkhator from a distance. Zarkhator looked at the figure before yelling, "Hey!" But the figure didn't respond. It vanished and acted like he saw nothing. Zarkhator just shook his head and raised an eyebrow. Was he seeing this? No, he couldn't, as it was impossible for him. He might be having mind games. This was the creature shown in the pages, and it's now stalking the dragon demon. Zarkhator couldn't even let this affect him, though. He had to keep going, no matter how difficult it would get. He found another page that read, "Can't run," meaning the victim most likely couldn't run from this creature stalking them. He grabbed the page, and he felt it again. Static. The throbbing pain caused him to clutch his head, and it was even worse than the first time. It was louder. Zarkhator growled as he pounded to the ground. It was unbearable and hard for him to stay conscious, as the figure taunted him with loudness of static. It then stopped. Zarkhator took huge breaths and collected his thoughts. He then got up and shook his head, shaking the painful feeling off. He then realized his entity was the one causing it, and it's preventing him from finding the rest of the pages. But he couldn't let this stop him. He needed to be done, and no matter what cost. He then continued searching. Another page found. All this one had was the word "no" written on it, left and right, and the figure standing in the middle was this was probably the victim's reaction. When the figure taunted them, he thought. He reached what looked to be the final page and had the words "follows," and then showed the figure standing by a tree. 8 pages Zarkhator had found contained clues. Nothing else was found, and the wind howled and the sound of crickets came back, but not for long, until the crickets went silent again, this time for good. A burst of loud static hit Zarkhator again, and it was even worse. It was piercing loud, so loud not only did he clutch his head and got on his knees, but he roared in pain as the throbbing in his head was becoming too much, causing him to drop the pages. It was also bad Zarkhator's nose also began to start bleeding, as if the ear-piercing loudness of the static and throbbing headache gave him a tumor. This lasted for almost a minute until it then stopped. Zarkhator wiped the blood off of his nose, shook his head, and got up slowly. There was standing in front of him was a tall figure. This figure wore a black suit, like how a businessman would wear. And as the page said, this figure had no face. Its face was pure blank, with absolutely nothing. Zarkhator blinked a few times before saying something. "So you're the one doing this?" The figure doesn't speak, however. It just stared blankly at the dragon demon. As legend has it, this figure was very well known to be a Slenderman, a tall, faceless creature known to capture children and take them into the woods, and may even go as far as to killing them. Zarkhator just kept his eyes locked at the thing. "So this is true. Slenderman does exist. And now I figured that out. The pages explain everything. What the children wrote before death," he said, still locked onto the figure. The Slenderman then suddenly began to emerge what looked to be black tentacles from his back. As they wiggled, they were just ready to be launched. Zarkhator took a step back, knowing this was the showdown. He wasn't going to run through. He had to strike this thing down. "Okay then, game on," Zarkhator said, before opening his death claws from his forearms. The Slender Man began to launch a tentacle at Zarkhator, but Zarkhator dodged it, and then he charged at Slender Man. Dodging each tentacle that hit the ground, and he had the idea, he began to slash at the Slender Man's tentacles, which chopped the tentacles off in the process. The Slender Man, however, began to start with a loudly piercing static screech, as if this was painful. This stunned Zarkhator as he clutched his head again, as the static was just louder than before. Then Slender Man grabbed Zarkhator with its tentacles and began to squeeze Zarkhator's muscles tightly. Zarkhator growled as he did his best to try to fight the squeeze in pain. The strength of these tentacles were very powerful. So powerful that they rip off the arm sockets. Zarkhator didn't let this happen, however. Sweat dripped from his brow, and he began to glow red with eyes and his entire body before physically releasing himself with a loud roar and chopped off each tentacle from the Slender Man using his death claws. The Slender Man screeched with a loud extending static sound, but Zarkhator wasn't letting that pain hit him this time. Zarkhator roared loudly and grabbed one of the Slender Man's tentacles and tied 2 of them to the branches. Zarkhator then backed up slowly before then running and charging at Slender Man, before activating his wings to let out a roar, before dashing and ramming into Slender Man. The Slender Man's tentacles ripped from the tree branch, and it looked like that it was strong. It was all Slender Man could take, as it fell backwards with force and screeched loudly. Its screeching glitched, and the static sound only suddenly made it went from loud to gone quieter, and then vanished. Zarkhator took deep breaths. He defeated this thing for now, at least. He got up and picked up both the 8 pages he dropped. The sunrise began to shine through the woods as it beamed onto the dragon demon. Zarkhator looked up at it and closed his eyes for a second before opening them back again and activating his dragon-like wings. He then dashed upwards as he took flight, getting out of the woods. What can Zarkhator do with these pages? Well, maybe he could put them up somewhere. Maybe a detective could look since he himself isn't all that good or social with humans. However, this doesn't mean he wants innocent humans to die under the hands of murderous urban legends and monsters that exist. The entity Zarkhator would likely face will be a bigger challenge awaiting for him. What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Miss Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, stay pretty.